Craig MacFarlane has been totally blind since the age of 2. He is one of the most celebrated totally blind athletes. He has participated in a variety of sports, including track and field and snow skiing, to name a few. He now is an inspirational speaker, inspiring others to find their flame and to live despite their challenges. What caused you to go blind at the age of 2 or by the age of 2?
You know, that's a great question, Alexandra. When I was 2 years old, living just outside of Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, Canada, which is above the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, I was playing in the backyard with my brother and a couple of friends, and they got their hands on a striker, which is predominantly used for lighting a welding torch. They were tossing it around, as kids will do, and it accidentally hit the inside of my left eye. Within 6 weeks, I developed a rare eye disease known as sympathetic ophthalmia, which left me totally blind. So I spent many, many months in Sick Children's Hospital in Toronto, several hundred miles away from home. And that's really how it happened. Just one of those freak accidents. And I suppose if something that traumatic is going to happen to you, I've always felt very blessed that it happened at a young age, because I don't really remember having vision. And so my adjustment period wasn't nearly. I always say it was more traumatic for my parents than it was for me.
Right. No, of course. And you were, just 2, so you didn't really, you didn't really know much or probably even remember. I mean, you telling me about your situation and your disorder. I mean, your parents told you, quote unquote.
Yeah, I mean, my mom often used to say, you were running before the accident happened and you kept running after. The only difference was you just ran into more things. And I just had one gear, and that was fast. And I think growing up on a farm and my parents giving me that hands-on experience was certainly invaluable and played such an instrumental role in my initial and early development. And I often think that was the foundation, that was the platform, or that was the first building blocks, because they never overprotected, they never over-sheltered. They gave me my wings and let me fly at a young age, if you will. Of course, with some guidelines, but from riding horses to throwing bales of hay when I was old enough to do so, or snowshoeing with my father, canoeing, fishing, camping in the summertime, whatever it may be, I was never excluded. I was always included. And for that, I'm forever grateful.
That's wonderful. And so was it, canoeing with your father, anyways, doing a variety of different sports and activities with your father that made you get into wanting to be an athlete?
I think my parents adopted this great philosophy early on. Mom was a school teacher, dad was a contractor. I grew up in a small town of like 400 people. And back in those days, there were no social workers. There wasn't a handbook on how to raise a kid without eyesight. So Mom being a teacher was terrific. And they just had this philosophy to give me that hands-on experience. And so there was no such word as can't that was ever spoke in our house. We just did it. And maybe there were a few modifications or adaptations, whatever it may be. But I was, as I mentioned earlier, always included. So their encouragement and willingness to go the extra mile on my behalf, just simple things like showing me the difference between an oak leaf and a maple leaf, or the bark on certain trees so you could tell them apart, or the needles from a pine tree opposed to a spruce tree, or whatever the case may be. Certainly working in the garden with my mom, picking beans, shelling peas, digging carrots, potatoes, et cetera, et cetera. It was just this amazing childhood that I had until 6 years of age, when I was required in those days to attend the only school for the blind in Canada, which happened to be approximately 500 miles away from home. And that was quite a shock, to be honest with you, because I got home 3 times a year that first year: Christmas, spring break, summer holidays. And you grow up quick, you become independent pretty quick, you run the gamut of emotions, and then you just become internally strong, or at least I did. And that is when I started turning to athletics in 2nd grade, when I had a phys ed teacher introduce me to the sport of wrestling,
Oh, wow.
because he thought it would be a productive way to channel some of that excess energy that I had. I was kind of full of vim and vigor, if you will, at a young age. And I never looked back. I just gravitated to it. And when I was told we were going to be competing against neighboring kids from nearby schools, sighted kids, that was the motivation. I was never driven by gold medals. I was driven by winning, because every victory in my young mind, I thought, brought me one step closer to going home. To going home. That was my ticket out. So, you know, I rode that wave, and athletics became a passion, became an obsession. And I wouldn't be here today, obviously, without my success in athletics, especially wrestling, but a multitude of sports in later years.
It's amazing. And what is it like to be, or what was it like to be a totally blind athlete?
You know, I remember at 8, 9, 10 years of age, walking in opposing gymnasiums and hearing the whispers of kids say to one another, "There's that blind kid." And honestly, it used to make my blood flow just a little quicker. And I thought, I have a name, and hopefully by the end of the day, you're going to know what it is. So I was driven by this internal hunger. I hated to lose. And I literally lived from victory to victory. And I was very blessed. I was very fortunate. I never took it for granted, but I won the vast majority of my wrestling matches against sighted kids, which, you know, by the age of 19 in Canada, there were 3 national television documentaries done on my life. And that was because of my success in athletics, but predominantly in the sport of wrestling, mostly against sighted opponents.
Oh, okay. And so, with all your athletic accomplishments and the different types of sports you've done, what do you think was your biggest challenge? Whether it was skiing, wrestling, what was the biggest challenge for, you know, in a particular sport?
Well, I think every sport came with a certain amount of challenges, but it's funny, you know, you mentioned that word, because from the beginning, I never really looked at a challenge as a challenge, if that makes sense. I always looked or viewed it as a hurdle, an obstacle, whatever the case may be, but I always fought my way through it, over it, whatever terminology you want to come up with. But I didn't saddle my mind with thinking, oh, this is such an insurmountable challenge, and this is going to be so tough. Because I think when you do that, you box yourself in, you paint yourself into a corner, and mentally you're behind the 8 ball, if you will, or you don't show up with your game face on. And so for me, I would have to say water ski jumping was certainly the most exhilarating, and certainly came with the most risk, because I was the first totally blind person ever water ski jumping in the shows at Cypress Gardens, Florida, which is the water ski capital of the world. And someone would ski beside me on a separate rope, same length, obviously. They'd give me that 3, 2, 1 countdown, line me up to the jump, and then it was happy landings. You were on your own from that point forward. And no 2 jumps were ever the same. The wind conditions, water conditions, boat speed, occasionally we'd get relaxed and he'd forget to count me down, and it's like, oh, we're here. And so I had some unceremonious landings, I must admit. They were not all graceful, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. But I just knew that every time I jumped in the shows, there was a certain risk factor to it, especially not having eyesight.
Right. No, I mean, absolutely, of course. And now, I mean, you've stopped your athletic competitive competitions and Olympics and all of that. So what are you now doing besides being a motivational speaker?
Well, that's a
these
great
days?
question. That's a great question. I still believe healthy body, healthy mind. So I try to work out periodically just so I can stay sharp physically,
Mhm.
and which feeds my mental capacity, I believe. I have a wonderful family. I have a wonderful wife, Patty, and our kids are terrific. Dalton, Derek, Ashley, and Morgan. So we have,
Well, you have 4 kids.
yeah, 2 in high school. Derek's a sophomore at Butler University, and Dalton's in Canada. So we have this amazing family, and we're so close, and we have so much fun. And before our world temporarily changed, we traveled so much to Europe and Hawaii and all over the place, Grand Cayman and Florida. And so we have this incredibly close knit family, and I cherish that. But you also mentioned, what else do I do? My inspirational speaking career in normal times, I fly over 200,000 air miles a year, predominantly
Wow.
around the US and Canada, but some international sprinkled in there as well, speaking to the Fortune 100, 500 companies, organizations, associations, you name it. I've done it, sports teams, everything from the Notre Dame Fighting Irish to the Miami Hurricanes, Wisconsin Badgers, just a ton of those. So it's an incredibly busy, demanding schedule. But I also am a great proponent in finding a balance. I think it's important. I think you have to have a personal life, a wonderful family life, which in turn will make you happy and functioning at a higher level in your professional career as well. So I've always strived to keep that balance. At times it's a little out of whack because some months I'm on the road 23, 4, 5 days a month.
Wow.
It's amazing, and it's just been the most blessed career. I've been doing it well over 30 years. I've flown over 4 million lifetime air miles by
Wow.
myself, spoke in well over 30 plus countries, and I jokingly say every country looks the same to me.
Of
Although they
course.
may feel different, smell different, sound different, but as you well know, with different and able, if you don't have a sense of humor, life can be pretty short. So we
Of
have to laugh. And
of
I think that
course.
sometimes is the best medicine for whatever ails you, is just a little laughter.
I totally agree, and I think you have a great sense. I mean, you have a great sense of humor, and I think you have a great outlook on life as well as, post your Olympic and other and athletic accomplishments. What you're doing now, being a motivational or inspirational speaker, and being, more at home with your family. I think it's great, and it's so unfortunate that COVID hit us in March, and you're not able to travel, at least not as much at this point, now that things have opened up. But fortunately, you get to do things virtually, which is great. So when you travel, also day-to-day stuff, how do you navigate the world being totally blind?
Traveling by myself literally has just become a way of life.
Mm-hmm.
But you think about how many people I come in contact with just in a normal day. You get dropped off at the airport, someone will escort you through security, another person, a gate agent, will walk you onto the plane, a flight attendant will give you a briefing and walk you off a plane. I'm a diamond on Delta, so frequently transferring planes in Atlanta, where you get handed to another meet and assist person to take you to your next plane, and the process goes on and on and on, all the way to get to your hotel a bellman or someone from the front desk will walk you upstairs. And I have three standard questions when I check into a hotel. I want to know how to work the air conditioning control. Being a good Canadian, or at least growing up in Canada, I like it a little cool. And invariably, they're never the same shape, or the buttons are never in the same place. Secondly, I want to know the TV remote, because have you ever noticed these new TVs, you hit the power button, and a lot of times in a hotel, it will take you to a main menu. Well, if you don't have eyesight, that doesn't do me a whole lot of good.
Right.
And then thirdly, but most importantly, I want to know the difference between the shampoo bottle and the conditioner bottle. Have you ever noticed they feel identical for the most part? And when I forget to ask, that's when I end up with hand lotion in my hair the following morning, because that bottle feels the same too. So those are just a few of the quick little questions I have when I'm in a hotel. But other than that, I navigate my way around, reasonably well. Of course, if you need assistance, people are there to help you. But I've never really had a problem. Once again, I think if you have a certain belief in yourself, a certain amount of confidence in what it is you're doing, trust in people, and of course you need to know who to trust, but trust in people. And I, stay the majority of the time at Marriott hotels. So there's a marvelous group of folks at these hotels that are willing to help when necessary. And the same on Delta Airlines. I've never had an issue, just amazing employees that are always willing to go above and beyond when needed. And that's why I always tease myself or remind myself that I'm spoiled when I'm on the road. And so I don't look at it ever as a burden, but I also will say one thing: you have to have patience. Because when I get off an airplane, maybe the person's not there to walk me to the next gate or to walk me out to curbside. And so you have to be patient. I've collected a variety of phone numbers in various hubs like Atlanta, Detroit, Minneapolis, Salt Lake City, et cetera, on Delta, so I can phone ahead to see if some of the folks I know are working. But again, you just have to have a certain degree of self-confidence, self-esteem, and belief. And when you do, awesome things happen.
Right. And so what about, even like, day-to-day stuff. So using your cell phone, navigating, walking around your house, getting dressed, all of that. How do you go about that? Because clearly, there's probably times where you're home alone, and you need to be obviously, independent, and even obviously when you travel too.
Absolutely. And that's an amazing question. When I'm traveling, I always try to coordinate certain suits with the shirts, with a tie. I just ask my wife before I go out on the road, but then it sends a touch. You need to know, okay, the smooth tie, which the one I'm wearing now is a smooth feel, whereas another one might have a rough feel, and that's a different pattern, a different color, maybe goes with a different shirt or better with a different suit. Maybe it's the buttons on a shirt that will tell you. So again, you have to have a phenomenal memory. And if I'm at home, a little different. You're throwing on a pair of shorts, a pair of jeans, maybe a golf shirt, a t-shirt, whatever. And so, if I'm going out or something like that, I'll ask to be a little more color coordinated. But, normally I'm just pulling out of the pile in my closet and throwing on a pair of shorts and a t-shirt, especially in the summertime, and a pair of flip-flops, and going outside with the kids or going for a walk or whatever it may be. But again, it's all about being independent. I don't like to rely on other people if I don't have to. Certainly my family and so forth, there's wonderful people around when I need help, but I try not to ask for assistance if I don't need it. I think it helps me too. It just helps in in everyday life, just functioning. And, I turn the conditioner bottle upside down in the shower, and I leave it upside down. So I know, because those bottles feel the same at home too. So, okay, shampoo's the right way, conditioner's down. Just little techniques like that. I have a safety pin. My kids and my wife laugh at me, but it works. I'll put a safety pin, so when I take a pair of socks off at night, if I'm wearing socks that day, I'll pin them together. So when they go in the wash, come out of the dryer, they're together. I don't have to worry about where's that straggling sock that the washer or dryer mysteriously eat or vanished. We've all had that. I never have that problem anymore because I pin mine together when I take them off.
Right. Those are really great strategies. I mean, I should do them, there's been times I'm just thinking more about the shampoo and conditioner bottles where accidentally, like you said, a lot of them are the same. They look and feel the same, where I've put conditioner on, and first when I meant to put, shampoo on. Now, clearly that happens very minimally, in comparison to obviously you when, it's being completely blind. But, your techniques are.
And if I can take it just one more place as well, when I talk about being independent, I developed at a very, very young age something that I call echolocation. And growing up on a farm as a 5, 6, 7-year-old kid, I instinctively started clicking my tongue sharply against the roof of my mouth, and the sound waves that would come back from it would help me detect fence posts, trees, pieces of farm machinery that seem to never be parked in the same place twice. And so it allowed me this sense of freedom to walk around. And even today, if my family and I are out for a walk, sometimes I will say, we just passed a tree. And one of my daughters might say, how did you know? And I will say, I heard it. But what I actually heard was from my footsteps. I heard the sound waves coming off of that tree. And I can tell if we're passing a parked car opposed to a tree because the sound waves are longer and more pronounced, because a car is obviously a lot wider than a tree. It's almost like facial perception. And it really helps me gauge space and time when I'm walking by myself, if it's around the yard or whether I was up on the farm or whatever the case may be. And so I just kind of call it my little built-in sonar system. And I rely on it even today. Once in a while, I'll just instinctively click my tongue.
Wow. I mean, wow. You're amazing.
Or riding my bike. If I was riding my bike, you can detect parked cars and whatever the case may be. Just like that, just clicking your tongue. Or how big a room is. You can measure a room when you walk into it. And being an inspirational speaker, I get in these ballrooms and I can just tell the width versus length, or sometimes how high the soaring ceilings are. And it just makes me more aware of my surroundings. So I've really honed that.
Yeah, so you rely on your senses clearly.
Absolutely. Sense of touch, sense of hearing, to a lesser degree, smell and taste, but absolutely. And I think those senses have heightened tremendously because I use them for so much of my day-to-day communication.
And what about like with the use of technology? I know that you had mentioned that your son helped you set up this Zoom call in terms of just getting on. But aside from, what are like specific software programs that you use, whether it be on your computer, your iPhone, iPad?
Well, certainly the JAWS program is a steady Eddie, good one that's been around for a very, very long time. I don't use a ton of talking technology. Certainly my phone talks to me and reads me texts and so forth. I have a talking watch with an alarm. So if I'm traveling, I don't have to rely on the front desk to call me, or sometimes not, although most of the time they're very good. I set my own alarm, or if I'm speaking and I set an alarm on my wrist. So when it starts going off, I know, okay, you're 5 minutes and you better be walking off stage or whatever the case may be. So again, I don't rely on it a ton, but it certainly enhances my world of independence. And I don't use a CNI dog. I think they're awesome animals, but I'm not going to drag a dog 200,000 plus air miles around the country and world to help me out. And think about it. When we arrive at Atlanta Airport, the dog isn't going to get me from A12 to gate B22. That's not fair. So someone's going to be leading the dog and me. So I think they're incredible animals that provide a world of independence to those people that maybe have a little bit more of a routine life or whatever the case might be. But in mine, it just wouldn't be practical.
Yeah. So using just a walking stick is more than enough for you.
You're probably not going to like this answer either. I've never owned a white cane in my life.
Really? So
Honestly,
what do you use? So you really just rely
on my built-in sonar, or because I fly so much. And by the way, I think canes are terrific. I'm not slighting them, but think about it. I'm either walking around with my wife or kids when I'm home, or when I'm on the road, the white cane isn't going to help me navigate my way around downtown New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, or Orlando. If I'm in town, I'm there for a reason, and it's to speak. So they'll pick me up at the airport. They're obviously going to give you really good treatment because you're a keynote speaker at their conference, event, whatever the case may be. So again, you're with people until you get back to your hotel room or whatever the case might be. So I've never had a need, I guess, if you will. I'm that 1 in a million crazy blind guy, I guess you could say. But I do think canes are terrific, because if I was walking around downtown somewhere by myself, yes, I would be crazy to not have a white cane in my hand to let other pedestrians and traffic know that I don't have eyesight. I'm just never walking by myself around town. I just don't have a need to. If I'm walking somewhere by myself, it's in my backyard, down the sidewalk by my house, or whatever the case may be, or down the hotel hallway to get ice. And then I just rely on my internal sonar so I don't run into those housemaids' carts or whatever might be going on. But again, I let my other senses help me navigate.
Right. No, of course. And that's, really important. I mean, I think, and like I mentioned before, but you're one of a kind in terms of using all these unique strategies, and obviously including not using a walking cane. I think it's amazing.
But if I was walking around now, I hope any parents watching this think, oh, my blind kid shouldn't use a white cane. I am definitely not saying that at all. I think they are terrific. I think for blind and visually impaired students that are attending a regular school, a sighted school, if you will, I think probably a cane is terrific to help them know where steps are, stairs are, let the other kids know, whatever the case may be. So, don't follow my template or my guideline. I'm 58 years old, so I grew up in a different era, a little bit of a different environment, and I'm a little bit of a free spirit as well. But I do get a reasonable amount of assistance just based on my career. I mean, I mentioned I try to be as independent as I want, but whether I had a cane or not, the people I'm speaking for are going to pick me up at the hotel. They're going to walk me up to the stage. They're going to take me off stage. They're going to take me out to dinner if I want to go, whatever the case may be. So that's why I said earlier, I'm a little bit spoiled in the career that I have. I work with absolutely first class people, thankfully.
Yeah, no, for sure. And, you mentioned that you have a big family, kids, and then your wife. You have 4 children, correct?
Yeah, we have Dalton in Canada, certainly Derek here at Butler. Ashley's a senior in high school, and Morgan is a freshman in high school.
My
So
goodness.
a busy house,
Yes.
and,
So
and
what do you think they have learned from you, and having an invisible disability and navigating your way around, and obviously all your accomplishments.
well, I think what my family has really taken away is that, and I've often said this from a very young age, blindness is not a handicap. It's
Mhm.
just a minor inconvenience.
Mhm.
And that's the way I've always viewed it. That's the way my parents uh, viewed it. Matter of fact, my mom often used to say when I was growing up, we didn't know how to raise a blind kid. So we just raised a kid. And that
Mhm.
was it. And so I think what my kids have taken away is that through hard work, focused determination, and a willingness to never give up or quit prematurely or throw the towel in the ring and walk away and say, I'm out of here, I quit. And that's not who I am. So
Mhm.
I've tried to instill this can do type spirit in them as well. And if you don't succeed, that's okay, but not for lack of trying. You have to show up and put your best foot forward and just try to give it your
Mhm.
best shot in whatever it is you're striving to achieve. And so
Mhm.
I, I think as parents, we lead by example. And
Mhm.
I often think leadership is the massive door of responsibility that swings on the tiny hinges of character. And that's
Mhm.
what it comes down to, is what is your character? And
Mhm.
that's what defines you ultimately.
Mhm.
So, hey, I wake up every morning, I put a smile on my face, I put my game face on, regardless of how I feel at that particular moment, and I give life my best shot. And that's all I can do. The world doesn't owe me anything. The world is not going to come to me on a silver platter. I have to create my own breaks and my own opportunities along the way. And I think when you've heard the old phrase, when preparation meets opportunity, obviously great things happen. And I've been very
Mhm.
fortunate to have wonderful, wonderful people and corporations that have believed in me over the years.
Yeah, and that's really important. And I think, obviously, your family included, having a support system, is very vital. And, unfortunately, not every single person can have the same amount of support that you have, or even that I have. And,
And I agree with you. And I feel for those people, but my message is don't give up. Find a way to ignite that self-lit flame inside you. And you might say, how do you do that? Well, find something you're interested in. We are all passionate about something. Some people like computers, some people like traveling, whatever the case may be. But find what your niche is. And then when you start learning more about it or taking some courses or whatever it is, I think it may evolve into a job or a career, whatever the case may be. But you are so correct. Not everyone has this brilliant support system like I do, and as you indicated, like you do. But again, I've witnessed firsthand and ran into so many people that have really done extraordinary things despite where they came from. And they focused on where they were headed to, not where they were coming from. And
Mhm.
I admire those people. They inspire me and they uplift me. And again, it's encouraging. And that's why I always try to indicate to people, if you see someone maybe a little less fortunate than you and I have been, extend a helping hand whenever we can, or whatever it is we can do to pick each other up and encourage and inspire and keep that self-lit flame burning bright. Because again, if you don't have an internal flame burning, it makes it very, very tough to ever reach your full potential, because you will reach stumbling blocks and hurdles and pitfalls along the way. How we overcome those, I think, cuts to the core and the essence of who you are. It ultimately defines who you become.
Absolutely, I totally agree. So you've learned so much through the years, being an athlete, now, doing more inspirational speaking and so forth. What have you learned, do you think, the most about yourself? And from what you've learned, what would you have told yourself 10, 20 years ago?
Well, I've written a couple of books, and you mentioned sense of humor. The first book was really my life story that came out several years ago, called Craig MacFarlane Hasn't Heard of You Either. And that was a funny title book. Former President Bush 41 wrote the foreword, who was a dear friend of mine, he and Barbara, in my life story. Just recently, I released another book called Find Your Flame Through Purpose, Passion, and Sacrifice. And if I've learned anything about myself over the years, I realize that everything really begins with knowing why. And I wrote a chapter about it in Find Your Flame. Because think about it. If you don't know why you're doing something, eventually you'll end up just going through the motions. You'll turn the first speed bump into a mountain of doubt, and you'll probably give up and walk away. And so what I found is knowing why is so essential, but you also have to recalibrate your why. And let me explain. What's important to you today, as you become more successful in your career, maybe 2, 3, 4 years from now, you have to move the goalposts. You have to recalibrate that why, because now you want to up it. Now you want to strive for something else. And I've always been driven by that throughout my life. I've never been a complacent person. I never settle. And yes, I pause to reflect and celebrate. And I'm not saying I'm over the top that way, but at least I'm incredibly driven. And what I've really learned, not to sound like a broken record here, but I've learned when you put the proper fuel in your fuel tank inside, great things happen. It's hard to become who you really want to if you're trying to run a race with an empty tank of gas. It just doesn't work. And so we all find fuel in an empty tank in different ways. But for me, it's always been having that great sense of purpose, a sense of passion, and being driven by a belief in myself that, yes, I can. And that's what has always been, I think, my guiding internal compass that's brought me to where I am today. I refuse to quit in the face of adversity.
I think that's wonderful. You've such great words of wisdom and advice. And, that was my last question. I'm so excited to see what else you're going to do, because you have so many more.
Well, and I might add, I was very fortunate too. One thing we didn't touch on was, how did I end up?
Feel free to talk about anything else that we didn't touch on as well.
A lot of people wonder, how did you end up in America? Well, my mom was born just outside of Detroit. So she was obviously born an American. So at 19 years of age, some of your audience will remember Gordie Howe, kind of Mr. Hockey, the Babe Ruth of hockey. I had the wonderful, wonderful privilege and pleasure to move to Glastonbury, Connecticut at the age of 19 to live with Gordie and Colleen Howe. And he was one of the most famous hockey players to ever play the game. And they took me under their wing. We had this amazing friendship, and they were great mentors, and he helped launch my inspirational speaking career here in America at 19, 20 years of age. And to share the stage at such a young age with people like Mickey Mantle and Roger Maris and Floyd Patterson, the former boxing champion, and so many other iconic names, again, is something I never took for granted, but it forced me to look inside and to always try to be better. Always strive to be a little better tomorrow than you were today. Is it humanly possible? Not always, but as I said earlier, at least not for lack of trying. And that's where some people come up a little short, is they forget to try and persist. And that's what I talk about on my new website, findyourflame.com, is that whole sense of purpose and belonging and believing in yourself. And if I can do it, so can you.
Absolutely. I mean, having a disability or an invisible disability or a handicap, and, I know we spoke a little bit about how, you don't see being blind as a handicap, but, we're, like you, and I mean, even though I was born with mine, it's, it's a gift. Like, we were given this, and we, we just run with it. And, fortunately you and I can do that, but, a lot of people, as you know, have a difficult time. It's actually very funny that we're talking, I mean, you're totally blind, but, we're talking about vision losses. I don't know if I had mentioned this to you, last week when we spoke, but, my dad, unfortunately, has had 3 mini strokes. I think it was about 6 years ago. He has a blood clotting disorder, quote unquote, and was traveling a lot. It's in the finance world and so forth. But these strokes, unfortunately, caused him to have vision loss. He's not completely blind. He has probably 60% of his vision is lost, 40% is still intact. And he has significant memory deficits, and it's an unfortunate situation. My dad's still around. He's 72. I love him to death. That's all I can be, thankful for. I mean, my parents are divorced, but, it obviously it is what it is, and I have accepted it for what it is. But I wish this happened again like 6 years ago. So he's around 68, and he can't really, find a new way and kind of, think about, well, what does this mean? How do I now create, quote unquote, a new life for, the X number of years I have left?
Well, one other thing I might add, whatever your inconvenience might be, I think the world is waiting for you. In other words, you have so much to offer, so much to give. And I think all of us are blessed with a unique talent. Your job is to discover it, to find it, and enhance it, evolve it, and whatever the case may be, and you'll be amazed. You may become something you never thought possible. And I believe you can.
Me too. So I'm totally there with you, 100%. Well, this was so great, Craig. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alexandra. I appreciate you.